You're watching Sunday Interview, and I'm your host, Grevazio Zulu. National dialogue has collapsed, with the conveners, Zambia Center for Inter-Party Dialogue, ZCID, and the church failing to agree to disagree on key issues that include hosting of the Secretariat, the agenda of the talks, and accounts for the process. For now, the two mediators have decided to go separate ways, with the church launching its dialogue process on Friday, while ZCID has equally announced and indicated it will soon convene its own summit of party presidents as earlier agreed. For now, it seems mediators need a mediator. With the 2021 fast approaching, is the country on the right path? My guest on the program is an eminent lawyer. He is a state counsel and advocate of the High Court, who has contributed immensely to the development of law and jurisprudence in Zambia. He has served as the Law Association of Zambia president. He is a seasoned politician who chaired the 1996 inter-party talks where key resolutions were reached. He has served as a member of parliament, as well as vice president of Zambia's biggest opposition party, the UPND. My guest, United Liberal Party president, Sikota, Sakwiba Sikota. Sir, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, has the dialogue process collapsed? Maybe we should start with that question.
Well, it has certainly reached a point where there's a hiccup. I don't think that we should, at this point, say it has collapsed, because there is still a chance that people can revive the process that had been started. And I believe that that is what we should be focusing on, to see how things can be put back on track. Certainly it's off the track, but not collapsed. We need to put it back on track.
Yeah, well, when you say it's not collapsed, what do you mean? Because for now, we have two processes going on. The church has launched its own process. ZCID has pulled out of the talks and immediately announced we're going to have our own summit of presidents.
I say that it hasn't collapsed in the sense that all the parties who are supposed to be having dialogue, all of them are still committed to having the dialogue. I would say it has collapsed if you had the parties actually saying they're no longer interested in dialoguing. What has gone wrong is that you have a situation of differences between the people who are supposed to be leading or chairing or providing the secretarial services for the process. And that is what needs to be fixed. As for the commitment of the people who are supposed to engage in the dialogue, that is still there. As far as I know, none of them have said they are no longer interested in talking.
Let's look at who should lead the process. ZCID says it must lead because it's the forum or platform for political parties. And the church also says, well, it has the experience, so it must lead, and it's and of course it's the voice of reason, and probably has a moral high standing, and they should not only chair but lead the process as well.
I think that the persons who should lead the process are whoever the parties for whom the whole process is for are going to be comfortable to lead. There shouldn't be an insistence by ZCID that we must lead. There mustn't be an insistence by the church that we must lead. Why should they be insisting on that? It is the parties who are to dialogue who should be told, can you please tell us who you'd like to chair? Can you please tell us who you'd like to provide the secretarial services? That is the way it should be done. Outsiders cannot be coming and giving conditions to those who are the main players. The main players are not the church. The main players are not ZCID. The main players are the political parties.
Who are ZCID in effect? Because ZCID comprises of parties, so it means ZCID is the parties themselves.
ZCID is a conglomeration of the various parties. It is a forum which has set up in order to facilitate the parties being able to dialogue with each other and cooperate with each other. They are not, ZCID is not a party, but it's a vehicle where the parties can come and discuss certain issues and have been doing so. So when you talk about experience, they do have experience as well. Just like the church has experience, yes, the church also has experience. Intermittently, they have been holding and chairing similar talks. 1991, for example, 30 years ago, they did. It's not like something they do on a daily basis. That's not the daily thing they do. Yes, they have got that experience. But also, ZCID has also got that experience. So now the real question is, who would the participants be most comfortable with? That is what the question should be, not who is insisting. That we should put aside.
Maybe I should ask you, who are the parties comfortable with? Because, I mean, you've been part of the process. You're part of the parties that belong to ZCID. ZCID had started the process. They met in Siavonga, agreed on the agenda, agreed on... There was even an announcement of eminent persons that they intended should have chaired the talks before the church came on board.
I believe that all the parties are comfortable with ZCID. They are members of ZCID. None of the political parties have resigned or withdrawn from ZCID. If they were not comfortable, they would have said, we are withdrawing our being part of ZCID. They are also comfortable with ZCID because there have been various meetings which have been held by ZCID regarding the same process, where they've all signed up. For example, June of last year, there was a meeting in Siavonga, and quite a number of the parties actually signed up where they agreed what the agenda should be. I believe it was on 12th of June of last year. And there were signatures from various people who attended. For example, for the Forum for Democracy and Development, Mr. Nathan Mulonga signed. His signature is there. For the Patriotic Front, Mr. Davis Mwila signed. His signature is there. For the UPND, Mr. Stephen Katuka signed. His signature is there. For the MMD, somebody signed. Unfortunately, the name has... oh, yes, it was Mr. Nakachinda. Sorry, I didn't see. Mr. Nakachinda signed. His signature is there. For the Forum for Political Parties, Mr. Jackson Slavwe signed. And at this meeting, one of the things which was agreed is that we agree that the broad thematic areas to be considered at the Summit of Presidents shall include the following. And 4 items were agreed by all the parties, the ones who are to be part of the process. The 4 things which were agreed were constitutional and institutional reforms, separation of powers and judicial independence, tolerance, freedom of assembly, and civility in politics, and lastly, electoral reforms. So
the agenda was pretty much set. Now, we've got a different agenda now under the church-led dialogue. And does that mean we're going back?
No.
And some of the members of ZCID are pro-church-led process.
In fact, in this same meeting in June of last year, it was agreed that ZCID would immediately meet with the church to set the program for the dialogue process. So at this meeting, the parties agreed that ZCID would then also invite in the church, bring in the church, and to follow the draft agenda that we have just talked about. And the church was then brought in. So the parties are agreed that all of these have got a part to play, ZCID and the church. Now, from what I understand, most of the parties agreed that the actual chairing, let the church do the actual chairing of the process. That there's no difference over. Now, there seems to now be an issue over who is to provide the secretarial services. And I think that most of the parties are saying that secretarial services should be provided by ZCID. But the church is told wanting to also provide the secretarial services. In other words, to push aside the ZCID. ZCID is the one which invited them into the tent. It's something like the camel story. Now the camel wants to push out those who invited them into the process.
Maybe ZCID doesn't look serious, or maybe it lacks credibility in some way.
No. If they lacked credibility, the church would not accept an invitation from somebody who lacks credibility.
We've got some of your members at ZCID.
The church came in on the basis of the invitation from ZCID. So they cannot turn around and say now that the people who invited them lack credibility, because that would not be a credible thing to say. How do you accept an invitation from somebody you say is not credible? So that should never be brought up.
Some of your members have gone out and said ZCID is not credible.
Then why
they don't trust, they don't think ZCID can have a fair and impartial dialogue process.
Why are they still in ZCID if they feel ZCID is not credible? That makes them not be credible, to say that we belong to an organization which is not credible. That is not something a credible person would say. A credible person would have left and said, this is not a credible organization, so I'm leaving. So you must be careful when you bring up issues of credibility.
Does ZCID have the capacity? There's been so much talk about ZCID lacking capacity.
The capacity to do what?
To organize and spearhead the dialogue process. The church has got experience, a track record, proven track record. They've been there in 1991. They were there, I think, 2016.
ZCID has got the credibility. They've had even drawn up the agenda, gotten the parties to agree on an agenda. If they didn't have the capacity or the credibility, in Siavonga, they would have not managed to get the parties to agree to an agenda. Now, the people you are saying have got the capacity and they've got the credibility. Right now, one of the issues which is still in contention is the agenda which they have now tried to expand. So the church is failing to get all the parties to agree on the agenda.
You do not agree with the church agenda?
I think it's too broad. It is too broad. You cannot go and resolve everything that is in there in a reasonable space of time. It is going to be very difficult to even have people focus when there's so much which they're supposed to be looking at.
When you say it's too broad, what do you mean? What are you talking about?
If you look at what the church says is on its agenda, you've got numerous things. I think I've got their document here somewhere. And it's got even religious issues, cultural issues, which are not very well defined. That is so open, so wide open. Is that something which the political parties should be looking at? Isn't it that they should be looking at issues of governance, issues of the electoral reform, issues of the constitution? Not looking at issues of religion, of culture, and so on.
So where's the point of departure if you look at it?
So the point I was making before we get there is the church has not even managed to get the various parties to agree what should be on the agenda. There is an agenda which was agreed in Siavonga. Why depart from what has been agreed and bring in things which are not agreed and which are leading to tension? Why not stick to what has already been agreed? And then if the parties later on wish to expand, they can so expand. not to come and say, you must also deal with these issues. That's not the way to go about it.
So now where we are is a point where the mediators probably need somebody to facilitate mediation, reconciliation between the two. Who does that? This is a very unique position and probably a scandalous one, isn't it?
You know, it's interesting you say that. When I read in the papers what is going on between ZCID and the church, it's clear that the two of them need to be reconciled. Maybe before these talks can begin, maybe for us to get them back on track. You remember at the beginning I was saying that things have gone off the track. They haven't collapsed, they've gone off the track. Way to get them back on the track is to first of all have reconciliation between the church and ZCID.
And that will be another process of agreeing on who should mediate between ZCID and the church.
We can suggest people who have done this kind of thing before, who can perhaps be the ones to reconcile the parties. You've got Law Association of Zambia, for example. Law Association of Zambia could be the ones to reconcile. If not Law Association of Zambia, perhaps you could have NGOCC bring together the church and ZCID and reconcile them so that this important issue can proceed, so that both of them are not going to be concentrating and focusing on saying, I must lead. No, I must lead. I must chair. No, it's not about them. They are not the central issue. The central issue is for us to get the various political parties to be talking so that a way forward out of the tension we have in the country is resolved. Not to create tension by wishing to be at the center of this. Both the church and ZCID should be big enough to realize that they should not be wishing to be the central point. The central point should be the people of Zambia and the people of Zambia being served by the political parties getting together and talking.
Agreeing on key issues. Now, the fact that as a nation we're facing even a serious brainstorm on agreeing who should chair and who are the eminent people that should bring groups together, does that show how far down we've gone in terms of polarization? Is the nation that polarized, such that everybody is looked at in a partisan manner?
No, I don't think it is that polarized. I think what the nation needs is for all the parties who are involved to sit back and say to themselves, what can we do to ease the tension which is there? What can we do to have this resolved? And not to come up with, I must be the one, I must be the one. That is not going to resolve this issue.
Shouldn't this whole process be abandoned? Because the people that want to bring parties together to dialogue themselves can't dialogue.
Well,
so what role can they play? They're clearly showing maybe they can't manage the dialogue process. Shouldn't we just abandon it, maybe?
No. The process should never be abandoned. The process of having the various parties talk to each other, that should never ever be abandoned. What perhaps can be changed if we cannot get the two to reconcile, the two being the church and ZCID. They are not the only ones who are there. If we cannot get them to reconcile, then somebody else should be brought in to chair. So this process moves on.
Who leads the process? There are two processes going on now, and nobody's listening to anyone else. So ZCID will set a date. The church will set a date. So which one are you attending? Maybe if I should ask that.
Well, what we are hoping will happen is that these two are going to be able to reconcile. That's the first thing. We implore them to meet. We implore them not to engage with each other through the press, but to actually pick up the phone and say to the other side, please, let's meet on this day, and so that we resolve these issues. And they sit down, no cameras, no newsmen or anything like that, and they resolve their issues. That is what should happen.
What are you saying? You're saying the church should halt its process? The ZCID should also halt its call for a President's Summit?
What I'm saying is that the two of them should meet, because we shouldn't be having two parallel things happening, and they should merge the two. They should also make sure that they do these things together. For example, they should agree who's going to provide the secretarial services, how the secretarial services are going to be provided. They should agree on having a joint account where the things which need to be done are done with both parties knowing what is going on. There's been issues, for example, which have been raised regarding the funding of the process. I think that having the joint account is going to help all the parties involved, in the sense that allegations or suspicions that one or other party is in it for the benefit of the funds which are coming in will then be laid aside, because everything will be transparent.
Why should people fight to own the Secretariat? Why should people fight to own the accounts? Is this whole process lucrative? Maybe there's something the public is missing.
That's something which is also surprising me. I'm saying to myself, why should there be an issue over control of the account and so on? Why not just do it jointly?
Secretarial work, hosting the Secretariat is a lot of work. Why should people fight to hold on to it?
And then also,
is there something the public is not seeing? Maybe you need to explain that.
I think
from the political arena, is there something that an ordinary person is not seeing?
I think that what we should do is ask those who may say, I want or we want to be the only ones dealing with the accounts. For example, to ask them, why do you want to be the only ones dealing with the accounts? Why do you not want it to be an open issue where there is accountability? We should also ask all those who may be saying, we want to be solely the ones responsible for whether it's a secretariat or whether it is the public relations bit, to ask them why, what would be the hurt with doing it together. And then that's when I think would also be building up the confidence in the whole process amongst the people.
Shouldn't we allow the church to manage all these things? More organized?
What makes them more organized?
More stable?
What makes them more stable?
Well, parties are basically, politicians are less trusted than church people.
Well,
isn't that reality? Really?
Well, I don't know why you say churches are more trusted. They are run by human beings as well. And
in terms of perception, they get the upper hand.
And if you look at the churches, just like with any other organization, they also have issues that arise. Even the Vatican and the church, the Vatican and the bank, the Vatican Bank, there are issues over that. Yet it is the Vatican. It's not something I'm making up, it's there. So let's not try to pretend that just because somebody is the church, 100% they're going to be perfect.
The church hasn't been too loud. They have not spoken too much. Probably ZCID has a problem in this case.
Well, what do you
the
mean?
Church has been quiet. They haven't said we want the Secretariat. They haven't said publicly, at least. We don't know that. They haven't said all these attacks and accusations are coming from ZCID.
Well, can the church then make a statement, if that is so to say, we've got no problem. Let ZCID provide the Secretariat. Let ZCID be the ones who will then be sending out the invitations and so on. maybe ZCID, in fact, is better placed for that. Because I'll give you an example of ULP. There's been no communication ever received by ULP from the church. And I know that we're not the only ones who have never received any.
And from ZCID?
But ZCID has got all our addresses, telephone numbers, emails. So them being the Secretariat would make a lot of sense, in that they would be able to be contacting us very easily because they've got all our details. So why not let those who already have that information deal with that? It makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, let's move on and look at the 2016 general elections. I believe part of the conflict that we're facing today comes from the results of the 2016 general elections. And, well, according to what is in the public domain, ECZ results were consistent with the church's monitoring group parallel voter tabulation results. But then, what many are saying, do you think the situation could have been different had the church strongly spoken out after the results were announced?
I think that the one thing I must say I was disappointed in is that the church didn't stand up strongly to say, wait a minute, what ECZ has announced actually tallies with what we have. There was only a very minuscule percentage, less than even a percentage, it was 0.0 something difference. A difference which would not in any way change the results. If the church had, at that point, made that statement, all these issues would not have risen to the levels of tension they had done. Unless somebody was going to say that they didn't believe ECZ, they also didn't believe the church. And it would have been very interesting to then say, okay, fine, what don't you believe about ECZ and the church? Why should the church be fixing these results to be something else? But the church didn't stand up to say, yes, we actually agree with ECZ. They should have done
Maybe
so.
they were disappointed with a lot of other issues during the run-up, the violence, the application of the Public Order Act, and many other issues.
Yes, and a lot of us were not happy with the violence. A lot of us were also not happy with issues relating to the Public Order Act. But in terms of you not being happy with that, it doesn't mean that the actual result, you should say, is a fake result. You'd first of all start to say, yes, this result is correct. These are the votes which were given. There was no vote tampering. But then you can say, but next time round, we shouldn't have the Public Order Act being operated in this fashion. We shouldn't have this level of violence because it may affect the result. But this doesn't mean that the result is not what it was. And hence, these talks that are being held should be focusing on those issues. Issues such as the Public Order Act. Issues such as violence and what powers the Electoral Commission should have if there is violence. That is what we should be focusing on. Not bringing in issues like now cultural issues. Bringing in issues like religious issues, which will take so long for us to deal with.
So you envisage as political parties to have a very short dialogue process.
And also the process of saying that this is going to run from 1990 up to the end of 2020. I don't believe there is a need for that. I think that the Zambian people need for these issues to be resolved quickly. We need to have this off the table so that we can concentrate on development. What are you going to be doing in those 2 years? It seems every time we want to have this long process. We had the Mvunga Commission. We had the Monakacha Commission. We had the Chona Commission. We've had so many commissions which have gone round the provinces and everything, gathering what the people's thoughts are with regards to the constitution and so forth. All those documents are there. What do we want to do to go round to do what 4 other commissions have done before? Why don't we take those reports and like a technical committee then deal with those? Why do we need to waste so much time, so much money on something that has been done before? Look at the various commissions. Which are the areas where there's been even some difference of views between the commissions? Very few of those areas. 98% have been constant and consistent. So maybe what you could do is just look at, in fact, that 2% where there's been some fluctuation,
some
and then see
in the reports. Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
but not to waste so much time, so much money, because even the changes that then need to be done once the process is finished, they need to be done before the next election.
And delaying the talks.
First of all, the constitution needs to be changed. Once the constitution is changed, thereafter, the subsidiary laws to support those changes in the constitution need to be done. Now, if this process is running up to 2020, and the election is in 2021, you will not be having enough time to do that.
Do you think there's
All
time?
there will be
Do you think there's time to change anything now?
There is time if we focus on the process being to the point. We know the issues that need to be dealt with. In Siavonga, the parties themselves identified what issues need to be dealt with. Those 4 issues, I read them to you earlier on. Constitutional and institutional reforms, separation of powers and judicial independence, tolerance, freedom of assembly and civility in politics, electoral reforms. Deal with those. That is what needs to be dealt with. That can be
They
dealt
equally
with.
look too many to be concluded in a very short period.
The good thing is that with lots of them, for example, when you talk about the political part of it, the parties have actually sat, ZCID is the one who got them together, and the issue of the party political bill has been agreed. And the same ZCID who some people are saying doesn't have capacity is the one that brought everybody together. And that was done. That is not the only thing that has been done. With the Public Order Act, right now I know that the Honorable Minister of Justice has been asking for interested parties to go and make their submissions as to what should be changed. But some people don't want to do so. So those things can be done. The processes are already there.
So I think it's an easy thing to do.
We shouldn't be merely grandstanding and wanting to look as if we are trying to do things, yet we are not. We shouldn't fall into the trap that President Trump and President Kim of North Korea have fallen into when they had the Singapore summit. They had all this great big photo opportunity saying that we've launched our discussions between the US and North Korea. Yet the groundwork had not been done. So it just ended up as being a photo opportunity between
photo session.
Trump and Kim. We should not have the same happening here. We should look and say, okay, what is the groundwork which has been done? Siavonga, this was done and so on. Let's build on that. That is what we should be doing, not going for photo opportunities.
Let's tap into your experience. You chaired the 1996 talks. What did it take to get the parties together? But at that time, you were last president.
Yes. It took a lot of behind-the-scenes discussions, behind-the-scenes one-on-ones with various people. In spite of all their work, though, there was a lot of tension, which unfortunately led at the last minute for the then Republican president deciding to walk out from the process, because he felt that he was being belittled and so on. And so that is something that we should learn from as well. And I think that some of us who were involved in that did learn from that, because some years later, when we had the 2006 meeting, again it was at Mulungushi, a lot of behind-the-scenes work was done. I'll let you into something that very few people know. For the 2006 conference, there were lots of issues as to whether or not the late President Mwanawasa was going to agree to having the constitutional conference. It was then being termed as a constitutional conference. And a lot of persuasion and so on was being tried behind the scenes. I myself, on 3 occasions prior to that meeting at Mulungushi, had one-to-one meetings with the late President Mwanawasa to try to convince him that...
2006, you at that time you were in the UPND?
No, 2006, by then I was ULP president.
Yes.
Yeah. Was that 2006 or 2007? 2007, when that was out. Yeah, I was ULP president then. And right up to the day when the actual meeting at Mulungushi was being held is when I had the last meeting with the late president regarding that process, the last meeting. And he said, okay, what we've been discussing, I've been discussing with others, and I agree with you. We will have the constitutional conference, but I will not call it constitutional conference. I'll call it the NCC. And I actually was having breakfast with him before that meeting. The one, in fact, who told me to go up to a thing and who can confirm what I'm saying is the former First Lady, Mrs. Maureen Mwanawasa, can confirm that she actually is the one who took me up to have breakfast with him that morning. And as a result, that's why I even arrived late for that meeting, because he started off and I was following, but he had the sirens and everything, so the cars were
the security.
the security. And so it took a lot of... I'm not the only one who was seeing him. There were others as well who were
you an
seeing
emissary of the other political parties? Or it was a personal initiative?
It was a personal initiative. But I came to learn that there were also others who were also talking with him. And so a lot of behind-the-scenes work helps. So that which everybody was expecting to fail actually lasted a very short space of time and was resolved. We did not have to go for a 2-year a process to convince him. It was a very short process that we needed. And I believe that that is what should have been happening. A lot of behind-the-scenes work should have been going on.
But,
like
but we
said,
have the president now who has
been
committed time and again that is ready to take part in this dialogue. So do you think all these wrangles are causing all this period to be a missed opportunity?
Yes, these wrangles are getting in the way. Like I said earlier, when we just began, remember I said that all the parties are willing. And like you say, the president said he's willing. Everybody is willing. Where is
So
the
who's not,
impasse?
who's not
The
willing?
impasse is between those who are supposed to be chairing. That's where the problem is, not with the participants. That's why we must have a reconciliation of those parties. We must try to reconcile them.
It is very, very difficult to have dialogue in Zambia.
No, it isn't. I
Because
disagree
even the
with
people that are supposed to
I disagree with
the people
that.
that are
It's
supposed
not
to facilitate dialogue also have to go for dialogue themselves.
It's not difficult.
Isn't that an unfortunate position?
It's
extremely unfortunate.
It's unfortunate, but it isn't. It isn't impossible.
But very difficult.
I don't
Look
think
at this.
it's
All the parties are willing.
Yeah.
Now you have to reconcile the people that are supposed to facilitate the dialogue. So you have willing people who want to talk and nobody to mediate.
You do have people who can mediate. The Zambia is not made up of only ZCID and the churches.
Should they be abandoned at this point?
Zambia is not only made up of those two. If those two are the ones who are causing for this not to go ahead, then we must tell them, please step aside, and then we must invite other people.
So dialogue can be very complicated. Again, I'll take you back to 1996. I know Dr. Chilwa walked out, and probably for some of the issues were very minor, the protocol issues, people refusing to stand up or failing to recognize that he had entered the hall. And isn't that very minor? But
yes,
but
that is
it affected
minor. It is minor, and it's unfortunate that sometimes us as politicians and so on will resort to such minor things, walkouts, and somebody
or refusing to recognize authority,
or refusing to recognize somebody. It's unfortunate.
But that happens at talks.
It sometimes happens.
Talks.
Yes,
there could be those are tactics. That's how difficult it is to host talks.
You know, there are tactics, and it's not only here where you have these kind of tactics happening. It's all over the world. You have silly little things getting in the way of serious things.
So did you watch those talks collapse? Did you lose hope? Watching the president walk out?
I did not lose hope. What I then did is I said, well, fine. He is an important part of the process, but it's not only him. He was not going to come here to dictate, to say this must be what happens. You, the other parties who are still here, still need to try to narrow down the issues and to agree as to what will be the way forward. And the meeting went on, and eventually the opposition parties which were there narrowed their position so that they had one position, so that later on, when a fresh set of negotiations was set up, and the president, the Republican president came in, there was focus from the opposition, and it was much easier, in fact, to deal with the president, and then some form of agreement was reached.
Now, let's assume the West came to the West and these talks collapsed. What would be the impact?
It would be very sad. It would be very sad, and I think that those who have been tasked or requested to provide secretarial services, to provide chairmanship, and to provide leadership should keep that in mind, that if there is a collapse, they are the ones who will be blamed in the future. To say, you mean you let this collapse merely because you were fighting over who should have what role in terms of the process? That became more important than the process itself. You lost focus on what it was all supposed to be for. And I hope that that doesn't happen.
Should maybe the parties attend both processes?
No, it wouldn't make sense to be attending both processes when they are supposed to be doing the same thing. What we need to do is to reconcile the church with with ZCID. It's interesting that the invitations that were sent by the church, I saw the invitation from one of the people who received them. Like I said, we never as ULP received the invitations. They've got a psalm that they quote on there, which talks about how great it is when parties are able to meet and agree. I would ask the church to read that which they had put on there and put it into practice. Let them agree with ZCID.
As we close, which way forward for these talks?
I think the way forward, like I said, is ZCID, the church must pick up the phone, invite the other and say, let us meet. Away from the cameras, away from the press, let us focus and put Zambia first. Put this process first. And then go and announce to the Zambian people that we have managed to resolve the differences we had and agreed that this is the way we'll go forward. I'm pretty sure if they do that, all of the political parties will say, fine, let us proceed now, let's go ahead, and things would move.
State Council, it's been a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you. I'm glad that we didn't need to have anybody reconcile us.
Well, you've been watching Sunday Interview, and that's all we'll have for you this week. We've been looking at dialogue and the challenges facing the dialogue process, and our guest was United Liberal Party President Sakwiba Sikota. We'll be back next week, same time. Pleasant viewing.